I will say that only people who have been treated in hospital with adrenaline are eligible for the PBS subsidised EpiPens. They cost $30 odd on a prescription, but if you actually want to buy one for your club, it's round about $100 over the counter, but you will need a prescription for this medicine. Do you
Yep.
I'm just on Penny, sort of that red light. Just about ready. Okay, you should be on now.
Welcome everybody. Really sorry for the delay. We've had a few technical problems here at our end. Unfortunately, we are no help to Emmanuel, and but he has managed to get it up and running now. So welcome everyone to our first live stream for 2021. My name's Penny Downey. I'm the president of Illawarra Beekeepers, for those of you who don't know. Firstly, I'd like to thank Emmanuel because honestly, without him, we wouldn't get these live streams going. But even though we've had problems tonight, he's been doing a wonderful job, and really thank Emmanuel for his time. Our club is going from strength to strength. We've been growing even through the COVID period. We now have over 358 members, which is absolutely fantastic, and really looking forward to finally meeting some of you new members. Hopefully over the next couple of months that might be possible. We've got a queen breeding course happening on the 20th and 21st of February, run by Bruce White, who's an expert on all different types of methods of rearing queens. So if anyone's interested in doing the queen rearing course, please just contact me through the website. There's also a beginner's course on this weekend at the club here, which is, we've got a lot of new members obviously joining at the moment, and so it's been really great that we've been able to put on this beginner's course for a few of the new members, and I still have a couple of vacancies for the weekend. If anybody still is interested in doing it, please contact me also through the website. We have a couple of special guests here with me tonight. So we're going to be talking about our bee stings and how to prevent bee stings, also about anaphylaxis and anything to do with bee stings. So if you've got any questions, please write them down in the chat and we'll see if we can answer them as best we can. So I've got with me tonight, I've got Bruce White and Lamorna Osborne. Both of them are experts in their fields, and really looking forward to, hopefully you can ask them some questions and try and stump them. I'm going to hand it over to Bruce and Lamorna now, and I think I'll step aside and be the one that asks the questions from the chat. So Lamorna, you're going to take my seat. There you go.
Thank you, Penny. Are we going to watch the video now?
We can talk a little bit about it first, and then we'll watch a little bit of the video if you like. Is there one thing you want to say before we go?
Just to say that this club is part of the Amateur Beekeepers Association of New South Wales, as Penny said, and we're based in Sutherland. The Illawarra is a very large place, so it's nice to know that it's at Sutherland near the station. These two videos and all the other videos which are available on the website are actually available for free. And those of you who are interested can look on the website and you'll be able to access all these videos. There's beekeeping for beginners, and there's actually a whole load of, how many, Emmanuel, exactly now?
Probably about
10, 12?
There's about 12 beekeeping for beginners and all the ABA ones.
And we've also got more advanced ones like splitting a hive and how to
Yeah.
requeen and so on. That's actually a very good resource for any of you who are interested in honeybees or potentially beekeeping if you're not already. Today we're going to cover how to avoid being stung. And Bruce White has done a video which is available on the website about that. And the other thing we're going to talk about is anaphylaxis. How important is it, and how do you deal with it, and how do you deal with stings in general? So Emmanuel, I'll pass back to you.
Yep. Okay, we'll watch your video then.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Hello, I'm delighted to be able to talk to you today about bee stings. Why am I talking to you about bee stings? Firstly, I'm a doctor. I used to be a cardiac anaesthetist in charge of intensive care units, and also I actually am a beekeeper, and I've been on the boards of various medical and beekeeping organisations for many years. I've also been stung lots, and that's where it gets interesting. Now, worldwide, some people are more afraid of bees than others, and we are very fortunate here in Australia that we do not have Africanized bees, because in the USA, where they have aggressive bees, there have been lots of fatalities from bee stings. Today my aim is to give you the background to the level of allergies in this area in Australia, where they happen, how they happen, and how to treat them. And we're going to do two sorts of treatment today. We're going to do the treatment of an anaphylactic reaction to a bee sting, and we're going to do the treatment of multiple bee stings in one hit. Now let's get a bit more of a picture about how serious bee stings are. In Australia, we have things like crocodiles and honeybees, and we have hornets and wasps, and we have road traffic accidents, and there are all sorts of things that can happen to people. I'm just going to give you some statistics about a very good study published in Melbourne in 2017, which puts those injuries in proportion. Overall, in the 13 years of measuring envenomations, there were 3,200 people turned up in hospitals throughout Australia. Of those, there were 27 deaths in a 13-year period. Now, you're actually 3 times more likely to die from falling off a horse, believe it or not. You're more likely to die from being bitten by a shark, and you're also almost as likely to die from being eaten by a crocodile. There were 23 deaths from dog bites in Australia during that 13 years. So over that 13 years, there were 40,000 people hospitalised in the whole of Australia, and there were 27 deaths. And our interest today is to find out what's happening in the background with allergies in general. Worldwide, allergies are increasing, and we're not really quite sure why it is, but there was an Australian paediatrician who showed, for example, in children with allergic asthma, that if you went to kindy, and if you actually went to communal kindy, over your lifetime you had less long-term asthma. And that study was done in Berlin, with East and West Berlin, because the two divides had communal kindies on one side, and they had the same individual staying at home kids on the other side with the same air pollution. It was a very elegant study. We're not quite sure why allergies are rising, but they certainly are, and there are some other suggestions that if you keep too clean a house, the kids don't get exposed to dirt and they have longer lasting allergy. And also with other food allergies and with bee sting envenomations, there is a suggestion that a low vitamin D alters the effect of the immune system and actually makes it more unstable. So keeping your vitamin D level up is really good, as it is in COVID times, because vitamin D also helps you to survive COVID better. It won't stop you getting it, but it will help you survive it better. Now let's have a look at the figures for Australia currently for allergies. Believe it or not, 0.2% of children develop anaphylaxis, and that can be to seafood, bee stings, peanuts, a whole load of other things, but 3% of adults can develop anaphylaxis, and that can be to all sorts of things. And sometimes you never find out what's caused the anaphylaxis, which is very distressing for those people. In our case, we're actually talking specifically today about bee stings. So here we are in New South Wales in Australia, and New South Wales is the most prolific beekeeping state in Australia, with approximately 1/3 of all bees, honeybees, kept in Australia. And they're used for pollination and lots of things, and they're actually in everybody's gardens. And we have 1/3 of the bees in Australia, and South Australia for some reason only has 12% of the bees, but they actually are overrepresented by bee stings in that they have 3 times as many bee stings as they should, given the number of bees. Now, is that because South Australians like more perfume, or is it because they wear more flowery clothes, or are they people who do things that are really guaranteed to upset bees, or do they just have a better reporting system? The answer is we don't know, but we in New South Wales like to think that we're doing the best we can to avoid bee stings, and remaining calm is one of them. Now, what is it that happens to trigger anaphylaxis? There's so much we don't know about this, but often a person who develops anaphylaxis to bees has had 1 or 2 bee stings before, and it can just come on. A sudden re-exposure is a common trigger in beekeepers, though, from somebody who hasn't been exposed to bees for a long time and then goes back to beekeeping. Those people are at much higher risk of developing anaphylaxis. And even people who are beekeepers who've been stung multiple times can suddenly become allergic. That's devastating if your business is beekeeping. Beekeepers' wives who actually wash their beekeeping protective clothing are also at risk of developing anaphylaxis. And we're not sure whether this is because they're inhaling material off the washing that they're doing, or whether it's actually through their skin. Again, we don't know why, but that's how it is. Being stung lots and lots and lots doesn't make you immune to anaphylaxis. It's a bit like me taking penicillin for a sore throat, and I can take it 50 odd times over my lifetime, but the 53rd time I take it, bang, I can become allergic. Now we're actually going to talk about the treatment. And we're going to talk about the treatment of bee stings in 2 capacities. One is anaphylaxis first, and then multiple bee stings. Most people don't realise that anaphylaxis kills people who have low blood pressure. And low blood pressure is the most important part of an anaphylactic reaction. If I develop anaphylaxis, I feel very frightened. Something is going on that is making me, as a person who's been stung and getting an anaphylactic reaction, tingling around the mouth, a swollen tongue, shortage of breath, could just be a panic attack. But if you're experiencing symptoms like that, go and find somebody to help you and lie down. So we'll get the person lying down. We will either phone 000 ourselves, or we'll delegate someone else to do it. And that's very important, because the person who is phoning 000 should not be panicky, because they will often stuff up the address to which the ambulance is being called. Now, we will also talk about some things that clubs can have on site, because for most of us, a bee sting will give us either a mild red rash or a bit of swelling and what looks like cellulitis. And those stings can be treated by, firstly, taking the bee stinger out to stop the dose of venom getting higher, as you've seen earlier. It can also be treated with some very simple things that you can keep in your house or your club. The first thing that we can have in our first aid kit is a 1% hydrocortisone cream. Now, you can buy this over the counter in Australia. You don't need a prescription to get it. And basically, this is available from most pharmacies in Australia. It's simple, it's easy to put it on the bee sting. The other thing that I would consider doing is putting an ice cube on the bee sting, because that's going to help numb the local tenderness. The second thing that I would suggest you keep in your cupboard or your first aid kit is an antihistamine. Now, Oral antihistamines are in general very safe drugs. Again, they can be bought over the counter. They're not expensive, the same as hydrocortisone is not expensive, and they have a long use by date in general. This particular one, Zyrtec, is actually one of the non-sedating modern antihistamines, and it actually is probably got a slight edge on skin swelling and rashes. And the dose is on the box, and you can get it for children as well as a liquid. The third thing that we can use is adrenaline. This is an EpiPen, and I'll come back to it. And this is adrenaline, which is actually available if you go and speak nicely to your GP and explain what you want the adrenaline for your club. You will probably be given 1 ampoule of this or 2 with a syringe and needles. However, if you are going to keep the EpiPen in your club, there are certain questions that you need to ask. And I'd like to thank Sheila Stokes of the New South Wales ABA for these questions to ask. An EpiPen really should be used by somebody with some training. Most teachers in Australia will have had EpiPen training. But the first question is, does the club want to keep an EpiPen? It is not a legal necessity. If you do decide to keep an EpiPen, where is it going to be stored? Do the committee all know where it's going to be stored? Who has access to it? Not much use having an EpiPen locked up in a safe or where nobody knows where it is. You also need to think about who is going to replace this when the expiry date happens, because adrenaline does have an expiry date, sometimes 3 months and sometimes 2 years. You do need to look at that expiry date. Often there will be people in the club who actually carry their own EpiPen, and that's why EpiPens are prescribed in 2 boxes at a time for people who are anaphylactic. I will say that only people who have been treated in hospital with adrenaline are eligible for the PBS subsidised EpiPens. They cost $30 odd on a prescription, but if you actually want to buy one for your club, it's round about $100 over the counter, but you will need a prescription for this medicine. Do you appoint a specific person to be in charge at each event? Do you start each meeting with a safety briefing so that everybody is aware of who's in charge or who to go to, where the toilets are and where the emergency kit is? I would say to people that I don't think everybody should have an EpiPen in the club. If it's used inappropriately, it can cause a fast heart rate and angina. So I think you have to think very carefully about whether you should have an EpiPen in the club. Often people who've had exposure or they've had somebody get badly stung will have a knee-jerk reaction and say, oh, let's all go and get an EpiPen. I would caution against that. I think this has to be a calmly thought out community decision about where to have an EpiPen. Now, if you go and see your GP and ask and explain why you want the adrenaline, go and see your GP and talk to them, because they may be willing to give your club 2 ampoules of adrenaline with a syringe and some needles. But again, it's a case of who's going to use that and do they have any training. When it comes to using EpiPens or Ventolin, if somebody is very short of breath, then often there'll be people in the club who are carrying an EpiPen or who actually have their own Ventolin. Now we're actually going to talk about being stung multiple times. For example, there was a Melbourne gardener killed when he accidentally disturbed a beehive and they all chased after him and stung him. It is extremely rare for this to happen, but we've all had chases like cartoon situation where bees have actually followed someone back to a car, or they've actually chased them and they've turned around and been hit by lots of bees. The problems actually depend really on numbers, and certainly in the US where they have killer bees, 700 bee stings is enough to kill anybody. But say 20 or 30 or 50 bee stings is enough to make you feel ill physically, and again it gives you low blood pressure. So what to do when someone comes in, or you can see them being chased by a swarm of bees, or you can see that they actually are in distress and feeling sick and unwell, is to get them into a place of safety and shut the door. Whether that's your car or in a building, it doesn't matter, but get them somewhere where you can get them away from the bees and shut the door. The first question is, where have you been stung? And the first action is to remove the stings, as the venom sac will keep pumping for 2 to 3 minutes, injecting more venom. Use a sharp edge to remove the stings, for example, a fingernail, a hive tool, or a credit card, or a knife. Use the edge to push out from where the skin is pierced by the sting. Don't use tweezers or grab it by the end of the sting, because you'll squeeze more venom into the skin. The other thing to do is lie them down, because it's the low blood pressure and tachycardia, and in the case of multiple bee stings, the actual venom itself is really toxic and makes you feel so unwell. And then dial 000. The other thing that can help people who've had multiple bee stings is to give them something like lots of water, but preferably things like Gatorade Zero or Staminade, because those electrolytes will help to bring the person's blood pressure back up while you are waiting on the ambulance. So reiterate, get the person in a safe place, be able to shut the door, get them horizontal, and give them some fluids to drink, whether it's water or Gatorade Zero or Staminade. And that should help to gradually get their blood pressure up. The other thing you can do is to put their legs up on a chair or a stool. It's very simple. Now we're going to talk about what happens when somebody actually has been stung by a bee and comes in and says, I'm not feeling well. Here we have Penny, who has been out keeping her bees.
Lamorna, I feel a little bit funny. I've been stung by some bees and I'm just a little bit anxious.
Anxiety is a really important clue to the development of anaphylaxis, because the person who is reacting looks scared. They actually are really terrified about what's happening, because they can feel these changes happening really rapidly. Have you got any tightening in your chest?
My throat feels a little bit dry and I feel like my mouth is feeling funny.
Have you got any tingling in your mouth or in your tongue?
In my tongue feels tingling, yes.
What about round about your mouth and your lips?
I feel numb.
Okay, Penny, I think the best thing while I'm assessing you is to actually get you lying down. You might not feel too bad at the moment, but it's pretty important that we get you to lie down. Now that I've laid the Penny down and got her to lie down on the ground, I'm just going to feel her pulse. She looks very sweaty, so something is going on, and she is actually beginning to get a little bit tight in the chest and frightened. And basically, Penny, what I'm going to do now is phone the ambulance, but before I do that, I'm going to put your legs up on the chair or anything else we've got available. Now, we have a chair here. It could be a box of vegetables. It could be a lump of wood. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as you get her legs up above the level of her heart, because all the blood that's in her legs will go back to her heart and give her enough blood to go to her brain. How are you feeling, Penny?
I feel
okay. Well, just try and breathe slowly in and out, and I will phone the ambulance. It's important when I phone the ambulance to actually say who I am and where I am and what the emergency is. So I'm going to phone 000, and they'll say fire, police or ambulance, and I'll say ambulance, and I'm going to say it's having an anaphylactic reaction. My name is Lamorna Osborne, and I'm actually phoning about a lady who's had an anaphylactic reaction to a bee sting. The address of the event is 98 Eaton Street South in Sutherland, and the lady is breathing, she's conscious, but she's very sweaty. She's got a fast heart rate, and she is lying down with her legs up on a box or a chair. 5 minutes, thank you. You might not have anything to put Penny's legs up on. But you do have your shoulders. Doesn't matter where you are, you've still got your shoulders that you can put someone's legs up on. Penny, how are you feeling?
Okay.
That's good. They'll be here any minute
Thank you.
and give you a drip. I'll just feel your pulse rate. I'll put your feet back down on the chair. That's very steady. And it's not as fast as it was when you came in, which is good news. You feel okay now? You want to get up?
Yeah, I feel better. Good morning. I think
Please,
I'll be okay.
Penny, please stay down, because as soon as you get up, you're going to feel dizzy again and pass out. So stay down where your blood pressure will be better. I know you feel all right in the head and you've come to, but I actually do want you to stay like this until the ambulance get here. The other thing I'm going to do is get you a soft drink, and I'll get a bendy straw. Now, bendy straws are good because you can feed people fluids who are lying down, and provided the person is conscious. Don't try this if they're actually out of it. So Penny, the ambulance is on its way, and they should be here any moment. This is where, if you were in a club that had an EpiPen, you would use it. And the instructions on the EpiPen are really clear. And in an emergency situation, if somebody's had anaphylaxis and they're going to do it again, they know to take the blue end off and to put it up against your thigh. Through the jeans is fine for this. And press it up against there hard, and it will automatically discharge. If you're in the country and you're on your own, or you're on your own when this happens to you, the best thing to do is go and lie down and put your feet up. Now, you might not have anybody's shoulders or a chair, but even a wall or a log or anything like that will do. And then try and phone 000. If you can't do that because you haven't got a phone, then try and find somebody to help you. Driving is a very scary thing to do if you're having an anaphylactic reaction, and I really advise against trying. But there may be situations where you have to, but just take extra care, because it's not easy when you're vertical and your blood pressure is really low to actually handle a car properly. You're much more likely to have an accident. So my advice to those beekeepers who are out in the middle of nowhere, they're usually accompanied by another person. But make sure, if you are on your own, that you've got a mobile phone, and if you're in an area without mobile reception, take somebody else with you, even if they're not a beekeeper, to sit in your car. Well, I hope you've got a good idea of what to do when people have an anaphylactic reaction, and that you don't end up with somebody who is unconscious. But if you do, then you need to perform CPR. And I would strongly recommend that all of you go and do a first aid course, including CPR. It may help to save the lives of one of your family, one of your friends, or one of your workmates if you know what to do. In conclusion, the chances of you suffering, or someone you know suffering from anaphylaxis, are 3% in Australia. And again, that makes knowing CPR and what to do with anaphylaxis really important for a sizable proportion of the population. It's not always bees, it could be shellfish, it could be preservatives in wines and beers, it could be peanuts, but there are lots of people that you can help if you have done CPR. For more information on what to do with anaphylaxis, there is an excellent website called the Australian Society for Immunology and Allergy, and they actually have an anaphylaxis plan, which is very straightforward. They also have anaphylaxis training online for doctors and nurses and people who need to do this for free. It's a very useful program to look at, but this is an anaphylaxis plan that is freely available to download. The other information that we have is for those of you who choose to keep adrenaline ampoules in the cupboard, or the fridge is best. Then there, again, on the ASCI website, there is a dose guide for children about how much of the 1 ml ampoule to use. It's very simple to look at, and it's probably a good idea to have that in the fridge or beside the first aid kit, and make sure that the person who's looking after the first aid kit has that there if your club chooses to keep adrenaline in its first aid kit. I hope this has helped you. Welcome back, everyone. We're going to talk about the EpiPen and how to use it. And you've heard my comments about how you need to have some knowledge about what to do. But to be honest, somebody who's never used one before can do it if they read the instructions. They're very clear. This is not a COVID vax. This is actually what an EpiPen looks like. It's got a yellow end and it comes in a thing like a cigar case, which is clear. To use it, you pull the yellow end open, and then you actually take the blue end out and slide out the cigar, which is the EpiPen. Take the blue end out, and that means that this EpiPen is ready to fire. It will fire automatically, and the best place to put it is on the outside of the thigh. If I press this in really hard, and it's got to be hard, it will automatically inject the adrenaline into Penny's leg, and she'll start to feel better. Of course, if Penny actually had anaphylaxis, she'd be lying on the ground, and she's not. But that's how you use an EpiPen. After you've used it, you store it back in the cage and put it in the bin so that nobody else can actually use this EpiPen. Somebody will have phoned 000 or in the States
Definitely. Yeah.
119,
Yeah.
and then we'll be free to take any questions that you have about avoiding stings, or also what else we can answer your questions about.
Lamorna, we've got one question about using tweezers. There's been a video on YouTube about using tweezers to get a stinger out. Is that right?
It sounds like a great idea for people who actually know nothing about beekeeping and who know nothing about the parachute on the end of the bee sting, which keeps squirting. If you squeeze that parachute on the end of the bee sting with tweezers, for example, you're going to inject even more venom into the skin and cause more swelling and more pain. The recommendation of anybody who knows anything about bees is to use a credit card or a fingernail and push or scrape the bee sting out from where it enters the skin away from the skin to take it out that way.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks, Penny.
I've got another question, Lamorna. Is there anything new on the market to deal with bee stings?
There is actually. It's not new in Germany, but a German company have designed a thing that looks like a pen or maybe a toothbrush that you can carry with you easily. It was designed originally for people who go camping and get bitten by mozzies or ants or bees as well. But it's actually been proven to be very effective. It's not chemical and it's not dangerous and it doesn't run out of date. The medical device is now registered with the Therapeutic Goods Administration in Australia, and the company in Germany provided a trial that showed that the patients or people who'd had stings or bites would put the pen on their sting. It goes up to 51 degrees centigrade for a short period of time. That changes the venom particles, a bit like when you boil an egg, the white goes white from clear, and that stops them being active in releasing histamine and also in causing swelling and pain. There's quite good evidence for that. In Australia, you can buy these bite-away pens from Paddy Pallins for about $40. It's quite exciting because there's actually potential for, in the future, maybe looking at whether it can decrease anaphylactic reactions. But that's a bit like way back early in the COVID thing when people didn't really know what to do. There's certainly the evidence that the bite away pen actually does work would be very good for someone who's allergic to ants or bees to carry with them.
Would you use that instead of an EpiPen?
No. No, that's a good question, Penny. Would I use it instead of an EpiPen? No. But I might use it first for a few seconds because it might decrease the severity of the reaction. We just don't know the answer to that question yet, Penny.
Okay. Do we have any more questions, Emmanuel? Do you know if there's anything else coming up? Anyone else got any more questions they would like to ask Lamorna about anaphylaxis or bee stings? No, doesn't seem to. No, I think we're all good.
We'll go to Bruce.
Bruce, have you got anything to talk about tonight?
Oh, thanks very much, Penny. Yeah, just to say to everyone watching, never trust a beehive because, bees certainly react to the environment, and if the environment's not being kind to them, it's windy, suddenly a honey flow stops, that tends to make bees, more aggressive. And certainly some strains of bees are more aggressive. And the important thing is, how you dress as well. Light coloured clothes are preferable. And, it's important not to wear strong, deodorants or perfumes because that tends to, also upset colonies of bees. You don't want to have any vibrations near a hive. You don't want to bump a hive. So it's really critical that you light your smoker properly because that's what's going to control the bees, and it certainly doesn't hurt the bees' smoke. I find people reluctant to put smoke on bees, which certainly no evidence that's going to hurt them, and they'll tend to gorge themselves on nectar and become more docile if that's the case. The other thing, quite often looking at the front of a hive, you can't tell if it's queenless or not, and queenless hives don't have the queen as the boss, they don't have the pheromones, so therefore they're also likely to be much more aggressive. Older bees, sting and hurt a lot more than younger bees. They seem to have, more venom, and as Lamorna said, it's critical if you get stung to take the sting out. Another thing I found is that if people get bees, in their veils or something like that, they tend to take the veil off straight away. That's not the thing to do. Leave it on and squeeze the bee that's in the veil. If a clover plant's out of place, you pull it out of your garden. If a bee's out of place, sadly, she has to be killed. No one likes killing bees, but when they get out of place like that, it's important to do that to protect yourself. As Lamorna said, until you get stung, you really don't know what type of reaction you're going to have. So, if you start beekeeping, it's not a bad idea to get a young bee, and young bees are hairy and furry. They seem to not have as much venom, they don't seem to hurt as much. So if you just sting yourself somewhere where there's some hard skin, at least that'll give you some indication, as to what reaction you're likely to have. But certainly do it when you've got people nearby, so if something happens, you can certainly, get help. So, and remain calm. Don't wave your arms around. Like, calmness is really critical. Bees seem to tense if you're not calm, and they're more likely to attack. Always work the hive from the side, not in the front, because if bees have got a flight path, which they have, like aircraft have, you stop them. How do they shift you? They sting you to shift you. So, they're the points, Penny, I'd just like to make as a general comment. But if you do a course, join an Amateur Beekeepers Association club and, learn your skills first, before you get your first beehive. But, always have the smoke going properly, always use it, no matter what, and never trust a hive, and that's why you need the smoker all the time.
Bruce, I've got another question for you. When you have a hive that's rather aggressive, is requeening the only way to calm it down? And if you do requeen it, what happens to the drones that are in it? Do they carry that aggressive gene with them when they're out? So would they pass it on to other queens if in the area where they were mating? Is that likely to happen?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Penny. The life cycle of a bee, as far as an adult goes, is normally 6 to 8 weeks on the coast because they're working all the time. So bees kill themselves by working. And on the coast, there's always food around. They generally work all the time and they don't sleep at night. You hear them ripening nectar at night. So they've got, a lot of intense work to do, and the work they do depends on the need of the colony. So a very short time when sunny weather, food is available, nectar, water, pollen. Now, if you live inland, they're going to live a lot longer. So if you live inland, bees don't have brood, so therefore they're not using a lot of body protein that also affects their life cycle. So in the tablelands, they might live maybe 2 or 3, 4 months sometimes in really cold weather. Go to Europe, they're under snow all winter, and they still live. So because of the short life cycle, if you requeen a hive, so on the coast, 6 to 8 weeks, all the bees are 100% totally different. The drones, everything else, and you've killed the queen. If you're on the tablelands, you might have some of those older original bees for a much longer period of time, and that depends on climatic conditions, food, all that sort of stuff. So yes, if you want to totally change the genetics of a hive, one queen bee replacing another queen bee totally changes the genetics until the last bee dies. So far as the drones are concerned, they usually live probably 2 months, and they usually go about 3 kilometres to mate with virgin queens. The queen that you've put in is already mated. So when you put a queen in, she's mated. So the drones and the workers are totally differently genetic to the queen that you've killed. So if you're mating queens in that area, the virgins will go to a thing called a drone congregation area that were well documented in some countries, and drones from 3 kilometres will go there and they'll mate with the virgin queen, up to 10, 15 times, but only in the first 10 days of her life. So a beehive is a giant family of different individuals. And the sperm, she can get 7 million sperm, they go into spermatheca, and she fertilises the eggs as they're laid. So you're going to get drones, you're going to get different genetic, worker bees, which will affect their genetics, and the drones are going to be different. So sure, if the drones are still there, they're going to influence it. But the good thing is, because they mate with so many different families, the aggressiveness in the bees is not going to manifest itself. If there's only one mating, one male, that mating became aggressive. It's far worse, but multiple mating certainly helps dilute the good and the bad factors.
Okay, thanks, Bruce. I do have another question. It's a bit off topic. Do you mind answering that, please, for us?
Yep.
It's to do with the pheromones that the hive has. So with a cloakboard method, and you split the hive, it's said that the absence of the pheromones tells the hive that it's queenless. However, when you use the Snellgrove board, the split hive, it's said that the absence of touch tells the hive that the queen's not there. So what makes the bees know that the queen's not there anymore? Is it the touch or is it the smell of the pheromones?
Yeah, I think it's the absence of pheromones because there's no queen present.
Yeah.
So to start off, we're now talking about queen rearing. So to get colonies quite often to start queen cells, if the queen is not present in the hive, that's the safest method and the surest method to get queens to start after grafting into queen cells. But there is an exception to that if the queen is not able to get to where the grafted cells are, so you can start grafted cells in a colony by just grafting into the top above an excluder between 2 frames of brood. They'll sometimes start them, and if cells are already started there and you remove them and graft in the same place, they'll nearly start them 100%. But the queen's still in the colony, so the queen's still queen right. So it's more the absence of a queen, being able to get to where you do the grafting that has the influence if the cells are starting. If you graft into a colony where the queen can get to the cells, they'll never start them unless the colony wants to swarm or supersede. So it's the isolation of the queen from the grafted cells.
Can I say that we are off topic at the moment, but this club is organising a queen rearing course on Saturday and Sunday on the 20th and 21st of February. And if you're interested, it will be on the website, or you can contact Penny, the president, through our website.
Yeah.
And the other thing is to say that don't get alarmed about bee stings and beekeeping, because actually the whole thing about beekeeping is to remain calm. And you have to be much calmer to keep bees than you have to be to play golf. On that note, I would like to thank everybody present and wish them happy golfing. No, happy beekeeping.
Thanks, Lamorna. Thank you, Bruce, for
Okay.
your attendance tonight. And thank you, Emmanuel. We'll might sign it off there. Emmanuel, is that okay?
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.